Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
We are the Juneau Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, and I'm the Reverend Teri Schwartz, worship minister here at the fellowship. No matter your age, no matter your strengths, no matter your beliefs or lack of beliefs, no matter who you love or who you live with, congregational founders or first-time visitors, we welcome you here to this community. The mission of the Juneau Unitarian Universalist Fellowship is to be a spiritual home for all people who are engaged in a search for truth and meaning. We are glad you are here. Well, let's come together in a time of worship. I offer these opening words from a colleague and friend, Reverend David Breeden. Yes, there is no binary. The road not taken is not a fork. That's too simple a thought, flipping some coin. Either or, nope. It's not this or that, no or yes. Neither and all, above and more is what it is. The road taken goes every way at once. There, there. They, them, go, now, live. We look everywhere for wisdom and a good word, day to day and week to week in worship. And sometimes that comes from scriptures of the world, like the last time we were together, sometimes contemporary poetry, and sometimes from YouTube. Whether 2,000 years ago or 2 hours ago, from ancient scrolls or pixels on the screen, storytelling can deepen our sense of meaning, belonging, of empathy, and connection to our common humanity. It's what we do in worship, and it's the mission of Story District. Story District is an organization in Washington, D.C. They teach storytelling to inspire, connect, and build a community of diverse voices in our nation's capital and beyond. Every year for Pride Month, they host a special storytelling show called Outspoken. For our chalice lighting today, we'll hear highlights from Rebecca Kling's story from Outspoken in 2017.
July 2009. I'm in Chicago, headed downtown on the train for my appointment at the Daily Center to at long last legally change my name from my old male name to a new female name.
You can barely hear it though, that's the problem.
Maybe 2 or 3 minutes, during which the judge directs more absurd at me than seems strictly necessary. But I know to pick my battle. 2 months and $526 after first filing a petition for name, I am legally and duly recognized Rebecca Roden Kling. So I go down to go across the street to the DMV, and getting a new corrected license is actually pretty easy. $5 and a copy of that certified paperwork. But when I ask about changing the gender marker from an M to an F, I'm told I need a note from a doctor. But it reminded me how much it can hurt to not have documentation that matches who you are, how difficult it can be to move through the world. And something occurs to me. Summer of 2009, I've been getting ma'amed more and more. I've been getting sirred less and less. I've been getting ladies went out with friends or using the women's dressing room at stores without a problem. And what if I go to a different DMV and tell a little white lie? It's not just me being stubborn. Okay, well, it's a little bit me being stubborn. But it's also that difficulty of moving through the world, of getting pulled over and hearing a roadside referendum on my gender and just being able to hand the officer my license. It's the difference of having that interaction with a bouncer or just walking into a bar. It's the difference of fearing that the TSA is going to catch me trying to smuggle a penis through airport security and just catching my flight. I head to another DMV. And my number is called, and I go up to a little old lady at the counter, and I say, "Hi, I was just at the DMV downtown, and there was a mistake somehow, and it says M on my license, and that doesn't make any sense." And she looks at me, and she looks at my license, and she looks at me, and she says, "Well, let's get that taken care of." The gods of bureaucracy are smiling on me. And I'm sure that some of that had to do with the privilege of the color of my skin and the way that I speak and being able to connect with that little old lady at the DMV. But in the moment, all I can do is stand there and nod. And she types away, and looking at her screen. And I am convinced that she can see right through me, that the screen is displaying my old name, displaying my old photo, displaying all of my lies and subterfuge, but I make it. And she hands me a sheet of paper saying, "Take that to the clerk. It was our mistake, so they won't charge you, but they'll need to sign off on it." And she sends me on my way. And in the moment, I am convinced that I have pulled the wool over this woman's eyes, that I have fooled the DMV, and that I have gotten away with something amazing. But since then, I've reconsidered. What if she knew everything? What if my old name, my old photo, my old license, and my old gender was on that screen for her to see, and she helped me out anyway? It is really easy to come up with a list of people who have not had my back, of bouncers and police officers and judges and people sitting in the Oval Office. But what if there's another list? A list that I don't get to see but still exists, of people who have had my back even when I didn't know it.
All right, well, let us light our chalice with love and welcome, and to be on the side of people's backs. Opening hymn today is number 170 in your silver hymnal. And to provide a little context for the importance of this hymn, I'm offering a performance by the Gala choruses, and they start with explaining the history and culture and how this song came to be.
On the heels of the newly formed women's choruses, gay men began to gather informally and sing. Closely on the heels of the newly formed women's choruses, gay men began to gather informally and sing. In the fall of 1978, a group of gay men banded together to form the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. Just a few weeks later, a tragic twist of fate brought them into the international spotlight.
On November 27th, San Francisco Mayor George McConey and supervisor and gay rights activist Harvey Milk were assassinated.
In response to this horrific and heartbreaking crime, a candlelight vigil was organized on the steps of San Francisco City Hall, and the men of the young chorus gathered for their first impromptu and public performance. Thousands of people flocked to the vigil, and when CNN broadcast the banner San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus to the TV watching world, the LGBT choral movement took flight.
LGBT activist Holly here, Tim, singing for our lives in her car on the way to the candlelight vigil. It was created in honor of Harvey Milk and was sung for the first time by the mourners gathered.
We're singing, singing for our love. We are justice seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our love. We are justice seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our love. We are young and old together. We are singing, singing for our love. We are young and old together. And we are singing, singing for our love. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our love. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our love. We are gay and straight together. We are singing, singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together. And we are singing, singing for our love. We are gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
Will you join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation? Breathe deep the breath of life and be here now. Our words for meditation are from the Reverend Julian Jamaica Soto. Dear trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and gender expansive friends and kin, and those of us whose gender is survival, let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. You are not hard to love and respect. Your existence is a blessing. Your pronouns are not a burden or a trial. They are part of your name, just shorter. Someone getting them wrong is not a poor reflection on you. It is not your fault. Your body really and truly belongs to you, no one else. The stories of your body, the names of your body's parts, your body's privacy, the sum of your body's glory. It is not okay for anyone to press their story of you back to the beginning of our liberation. We will find the people ready to be ready to be on the freedom for the people way. We will go on. No one can rename you other. It can't stick as you offer the gift of being and saying who you are. Mostly, though, your stories belong to you. Your joy and complexity are beautiful, however you may choose to tell it or not tell it. Some folks, cis, may take their liberty for an unholy license. You, our beloved, please keep to our shared tasks of healing, getting free. Our responsive hymn is in your teal hymnal, How Could Anyone?
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your love is how deeply you're connected to my soul? How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your love is how deeply you're connected to my soul? How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your love is a miracle? How deeply connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your love is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your love is how deeply you're connected to my soul?
They were excited to visit the DMV. They couldn't sleep and left home at 4:24 in the morning so they could be the first person inside when the door opened 3 hours later. They were about to become the first person in the country to receive the city's new gender-neutral driver's license, which designates genders by male, female, or X. And 3 hours later, they received their accurate ID. They said, it's important to me because it means knowing that I'm valid and not erased. That's the story of Shige Sakurai, who doesn't identify with a specific gender. Sakurai uses the pronouns they and them. That was in 2017, when the District of Columbia became the first jurisdiction in the country to offer non-binary driver's licenses and ID cards. Now, 6 years later, nearly half of US states allow people to have an accurate ID. At the federal level, the government still does not permit gender-neutral or non-binary markers on passports, social security records, and most other federal documents. In 2021, Sakurai told the American Civil Liberties Union, I believe I have a legal and human right to access accurate ID documents. This is not merely a bureaucratic issue. This can be a life or death issue. Sakurai says they've experienced street harassment and physical assault because of being non-binary. They said, I've also seen editorials written to demean me and horrifying comments on news articles saying non-binary people should be sent to a guillotine or gas chamber. All of these acts of violence seek to erase me. I do not need the federal government erasing me too. Shige Sakurai is the Reverend Shige Sakurai, Director of Equity, Belonging, and Change at the UUA. Our concept that there are only two genders is simply a matter of our culture and moment in history. Cultures throughout time and around the world have some form of a third gender, often who have special roles in society. Sometimes the third gender is a fixed identity, and sometimes the third gender is a category of fluid identities. In Samoa, there are the Fa'afafin. In Muslim Indian societies, there are the Hijiras. In the Ottoman Empire, there were the Cossack. In Oaxaca, Mexico, there are the Mujes in Zapotec culture. In numerous American indigenous cultures, there are two-spirited people. In Thailand, the Kathaways. In Indonesia, the Warriors. In indigenous Hawaiian culture, a third gender is the Mahus. And increasingly in US culture, we have genderqueer identities. So what if our culture's gender binary actually isn't accurate? Sometimes our culture gets things wrong, really wrong. In the 1950s, our culture was telling Black girls they couldn't go to integrated schools, let alone spaceships. Then along came Mae Jemison. At the time, our culture didn't have a category for a Black woman astronaut until Mae Jemison launched into space in 1992 as a mission specialist aboard the space shuttle Endeavour. Now, as a little girl, Jemison watched the Apollo airings on TV. She was upset there were no female astronauts. Jemison was inspired by African-American actress Nichelle Nichols on Star Trek. And Jemison was determined to travel to space. The culture was wrong. It had to change, and it still has to. So gender studies could be a lifetime, multiple PhD enterprise. So here's the TLDR summary. For those of you who may not be familiar with the abbreviation, that's the internet jargon for too long, didn't read. There are more than two genders. You can't tell a person's gender by looking at them. Only a person can tell their own gender because there's an internal sense of identity. And a person's gender may or may not correspond with the body they were born with. A trouble in English is that we use gendered pronouns to refer to other people. She, him, hers, his. And typically we have used they, them for the third person plural or the third person singular, but only when the gender of the subject is unknown. More and more people are using they, them pronouns because the idea that they're only male or female, this or that, one or the other, isn't any truer than the old idea that a Black woman couldn't be an astronaut. For my fellow grammar enthusiasts out there, I feel you. And yes, you can use they, them as a third person singular gender neutral pronoun. If it sounds different to you with practice, you'll get accustomed to it. A linguist on NPR assured the listening audience that the third person singular use of they, them is okay because language changes all of the time. So why? Why do pronouns matter? Some people prefer they, them pronouns because they aren't a single or a specific gender. Think back, this is kind of like using Ms. because a person doesn't think their marital status should be a relevant issue. Remember the days when he was universal language for all people, but it actually wasn't and isn't? Gender identity is on the inside. It doesn't always correlate to the body we're born into. And when we guess someone's pronouns, we make an assumption based on how someone looks to us. And when we do this, we assume. Remember the old saw about what happens when you assume. And so when we assume someone's gender by guessing their pronoun, we are telling them you have to look a certain way for us to believe You are who you are. We're telling them, if you don't fit my idea of how a man should look, dress, and act, or how a woman should look, dress, and act, you are other. Gender nonconforming people get a lot of personal questions and scrutiny, sometimes at the risk of their safety. Sometimes we might be curious about all sorts of things. But my general guidance is if it's not a question you would have asked Grandma at Thanksgiving, it is probably not a good question to ask someone who is gender nonconforming. Grandma, are you really sure you're a woman? I mean, how do you know? I mean, don't you think it's a phase? You don't need to know if she wears skirts more often than pants, wears her hair long or short, the gender of the people she's been attracted to, nor the constellation of her genitals. We just simply call her by the name she likes. Grandma, Nana, Nona, Jane, Catherine, whatever she wants. It can sound really complex, but at its core it's not. Don't worry about it. We call a person by the pronoun they want, just like we call them by the name they want. I've heard it said, but I'm not comfortable using she for so-and-so. Well, I'll let you in on a big secret. It's not about you. You can't know someone's gender by looking at them. But most importantly, it's about treating another person with respect. It's the platinum rule. Treat someone not as you wish to be treated, but as they wish to be treated. And so maybe you've wondered, why should we all share our preferred pronouns? Why is this kind of a new movement and expectation in Unitarian Universalist circles? Can't you tell by just looking at me? Well, no. Gender can only be known on the inside. It also lets everyone share their pronouns without othering themselves. And in our congregations and Unitarian Universalist events and Zoom meetings, when we wear a pronoun name tag, it reduces the scrutiny for someone whose appearance may look different than we were taught to expect. It also signals you're a safe person to talk to. And it lets us ensure that everyone feels respected and is welcome. Ultimately, it's about treating other people with respect, about our value of inherent worth and dignity of every person. And it's not just meaning it, but living it, keeping pace with it. Because culture doesn't stand still. Language always changes, and culture has already moved on. 2 million American adults identify as non-binary, and 13.7 million kids identify as non-binary. And we get to decide if they will feel welcome here. It means we get to choose which list we'll be on. As Rebecca described, the list of bouncers, police officers, judges, and former presidents who don't have the backs of trans and non-binary people, or the invisible list that does have the backs of trans and non-binary people. Culture changes, language changes, and thank goodness, because we needed Mae Jemison on Space Shuttle Endeavour. And moreover, Mae Jemison needed a world where she could live her potential and achieve her determined dreams. And more than that, where a Black little girl in Southside Chicago and everywhere can be guaranteed access to a high-quality education and public investment to follow her stars. To be the church of today and the church for tomorrow, we need to grow and change too. About those driver's licenses with forced male and female genders, Sakurai said, I didn't previously feel like I had a choice. It's been in my mind for 14 years that this can be possible. And it is. If of all things the government can be progressive, then as a liberal congregation committed to the inherent worth and dignity of all people, we can do even better. The grammar of inclusion is the language of all, and may we use it wisely and well and with love. please join with me in our hymn number 95 in your silver hymnal, There Is More Love.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere. There is more somewhere. There is more somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more somewhere.
Thank you so much. Those are thoughts that often come up in discussion. And on one hand, we kind of want to minimize difference and embrace universality of the inherent worth and dignity of all people. And yet at the same time, we live in a culture in which someone's gender identity can threaten their very life. So as long as we're in that situation, it remains a particularly significant issue. And there is beauty and simplicity. Sometimes I think if we had a non-gendered pronoun in our language as the only possibility, that would make sense for everyone. But we're also socialized that both are given names or chosen names and our pronouns reflect identity. And so not everyone feels they, them expresses their gender. And so if we were to lose she, her, he, him, or a bunch of the other new pronouns that have been developed as our language is evolving, then we would also be taking away that possibility for someone's authentic sense of self in the same way they give us their name or their nickname or preferred name. It's not simple, and definitely within the trans community, there are so many different perspectives and ways of identifying and combinations of pronouns that are used. My eldest child says they want to use any and all pronouns, which I find a bit confusing, and yet I try to lean in that maybe my mind is really what's limited here. Maybe that expresses a better sense of who they think they are. And I think back because I remember in my lifetime when the universal was he and not she, and in language, we're just supposed to presume, well, she is included. I remember learning that as a young child in elementary school. And when I started hearing alternatives as my world got bigger, it at first seemed like people were making a big fuss about why should we also have him or her, he or she. It made the language fall like a cacophony on the ear. But over time, it became clearer and clearer to me that it actually didn't often include everyone. It comes from a time of even greater patriarchy than now. And I'm sure in this room, you can remember when women couldn't have credit cards, weren't allowed to wear pants to dressy events, or it wouldn't be considered socially acceptable not to wear a skirt, couldn't have birth control as a discussion with their own doctor without their husband's permission. And so the way we structure language both reflects and creates our reality. And so I'm trying to lean into having kind of an open heart and mind, and it's taken practice. And I'll be really honest that it was an intern years back, maybe 6 or 7 years ago of mine, who wanted to start an initiative as one of their learning projects to bring the issue of pronoun uses to our congregation and create name tags that would have people's pronouns of choice as a ribbon attached to their name tags, and get name tags for all staff members with their pronouns. And it took me a long time to like really get on board. I wasn't opposed. It was their project. It kind of felt like at the leading edge. All right, go ahead. But I didn't get the gravity of it until I learned more about their story and started digging in and letting my heart be moved and expanding my world. So it's been a journey for me, for sure. And we all are at different stages wherever we are. And in larger congregations, there's often some real pushback among a minority of people, but it can be a significant issue in the life of congregations and how we move into the future and be the welcoming place we hope to be. Yeah, we've used it a long time in English when the person's gender is unknown. And so that lands on the ear pretty easily. And it's not that far of a step here because the construction is reflecting back that known or unknown, that is somewhat irrelevant and is dependent on the person and their choice. I so love the example of how our language has also shifted away more generally from having specific variants of words for women, which then were often held in lower esteem. That's a great bit of evidence of how both the language and the culture have changed and informed one another. I love that.